So glad that you all are here. My name is Dan Hardt. I'm a financial planner in Louisville, Kentucky. And day-to-day financial planning, face-to-face with clients is what I do. Tommy Alvey is back there doing the handouts. He's my associate there. And so I'm not a professional speaker, but this is a topic that I have a real passion about. And Brad asked me to come and speak about it. I'm really privileged to do that. Just to kind of get an idea of who's in the room and to get to know each other. So who here, like me, is the person who's face-to-face with clients, helping them to make investment decisions? Is that you all? Okay, so it's most of the people that are in the room. Another question, who is a member of Kingdom Advisors? Okay, a lot of you. I would really encourage that. You've heard a lot about that, and I expect that you do. It's a great thing. I've been a member since before they knew how to take my check. So it is a great organization. Another question, who here has ever altered their investment recommendation for somebody based on a biblical or an ethical issue? Okay, so we've done some of that, maybe 2/3 or so to one extent or another. And also just important to know in a group setting, who's here has ever been sent to the principal's office for disciplinary reasons? Okay, all right, and then who other than me has ever fainted in public? All right, it's just good to know that in a group setting. All right, I'm going to try not to go that way okay. What do you think of? Here's a question. Just shout out. When we do Q&A, we'll use a microphone. But here, just shout out. What's the first thing you think of, one or two words, when you hear the phrase biblically responsible investing? God honoring. Thank you. What else?
I know it's not true, but the concern of performance.
Performance. Great question. All right, great word. What else? Come on, anybody, everybody. What do you think of? Say? Conservative, okay.
Timothy Plan.
Timothy Plan, said from Zach Covert. Okay, what else? What else? What else do you think? It doesn't have to be nice. Okay, we're all brothers and sisters here. All right. So thank you for enduring me with that. What we're going to do today is we're going to define and kind of place biblically responsible investing. Where does it fit? We're going to look at some Christian scriptural perspective about all of that. We're going to look at some issues and examples, at least in one area where we'll kind of go a little bit deep. We're also going to look at some resources and then the advisor's journey. Okay, your journey into this and what that might look like. And we're going to have Q&A. I just love Q&A on this topic. It's also often very vibrant. Some things you got to kind of lay the foundation of money in our hands to think about biblically responsible investing, I think, in the right way. So you've heard this phrase that everything belongs to God, and it's something I'm betting that you all have heard many, many times. It's very easy to hear, very easy to agree with, very hard to live. And I've come to realize that that's just something I'm going to live every day for the rest of my life. What does that mean? We are the managers, the stewards of the money that's in our care. And a Ron Ballou quote, when you put all this together, which I think just kind of really resonates with me, is that every financial decision is a spiritual decision. Now, I don't know about you, but when I first hear a phrase like that, it just puts this weight on my shoulders. Every financial decision is a spiritual decision. Wow. But sometime after kind of working through that, I realized that this is really good news. Every decision is an opportunity to look to God to say, what's your perspective about this? Okay, what can I learn from you, from your word about this? And that is a really good thing. A little overwhelming still, maybe, but a really good thing. When we look at defining biblically responsible investing, then the verse, and we actually have already seen it earlier today, Corinthians 10:31, Paul tells the Corinthians that whatever you do, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do it all for the glory of God. So a definition, this actually came from the Kingdom Advisors Biblically Responsible Investing Community Group. And we developed a definition which simply says investing that seeks to please and glorify God as a vital act of worship. I'd really like to invite you to start your thinking, your processing about biblically responsible investing, especially if it's new to you, with that definition: investing that seeks to please and glorify God as a vital act of worship. So a question: is it possible to worship God by the way we invest money? We'll leave that rhetorical for the moment. Why the word biblically? There's actually some pushback about that, biblically responsible investing. Well, years ago, by the way, the concept has been around for centuries. For centuries, the idea that I'm going to look at investing differently because I'm a Christian, I'm a believer, that's been around for centuries. The phrase itself has been around 14 years. In June of 2004, my friend Roger Dillon had just whipped me up on the racquetball court, and we were walking around a track they had there at the facility, and we were actually talking about this subject. He's not a financial advisor, but we were talking about it, and we were talking about what it's called. And so there are a lot of phrases out there like morally responsible investing. A good phrase, but whose morals? How do you define that? Values-based investing, faith-based investing. But again, what's the foundation of any of that? Socially responsible investing. None of those hit the nail on the head for us. And now there is principles-based reasoning investing. There's ESG, environmental, social governance, and these kinds of things as well. And again, all, I think, good phrases. They just didn't hit the nail on the head. I don't know if he said it first or I did, but the phrase biblically responsible investing came out of one of our mouths. I was the president of a Christian financial planner organization at the time, so I started using the phrase and it kind of caught on. The Bible, the key here is the Bible is the source of all of this. The Bible is the source of truth. It's our guide. It determines the perspective on anything. It determines what is good, what is bad, what is noble. Again, the Bible. Of those three words, biblically responsible investing, I think biblically is the most important of those three words. Again, that is our source. The second word, responsible, is probably the weakest, frankly. It could just as easily be biblically based investing, biblically inherent investing, anything of that nature. And the word investing, of course, that's what we do. That's what you and I do. And that's the subject on which our clients rely on us to know what it is that needs to be known and to communicate to them what it is that needs to be known on this topic. The scope of biblically responsible investing, if you just take those words, again, biblically responsible investing, is that it really is very broad in scope, and to me covers the who, what, why, when, where, and how of investing. So we often think of the where of investing, where we invest, where we don't, but also it's the who, what, when, where, why, and how. So the who, of course, is you, it's your client. The what is the investing. The why is important. Sometimes, often, it's appropriate to accumulate money. It is biblically sound thinking to accumulate something for the future. But this relates all to our motives. You can also accumulate for the wrong reasons. It breaks my heart to think of what money are we managing for clients that doesn't belong there, that it should be used some other way. God would love to use it in some other way, and we're missing it. When to invest? Of course, you invest, this has everything to do with priorities. After you're giving the way you're called to give, responsible with that, living within your income, and all of these different kinds of things. Biblically responsible investing is also how we invest. The Bible actually has methods that actually talks about investing little by little. And the diversification verse that most of us know, Ecclesiastes 11:2, give portions to 7, yes to 8, for you do not know what disaster may come upon the land. So biblically responsible investing is about all of this. Okay, it also is about the topic that we often think about when we hear the phrase biblically responsible investing is where to invest. I love 1 Peter 4:10. It's one of my favorite verses. It says, each one should use whatever gift he has received to serve others, faithfully administering God's grace in its various forms. I don't know about you, but when I think about having money to set aside for the future, especially the long-term future like a lot of our investments are for, if we have money like that's a gift. That is a gift. So what does Peter say? Each one should use whatever gift he has received to do what? To serve others. Faithfully administering God's grace in its various forms. So when I think about where to invest, I think about how do I use that so that that is a gift, that it is a part of God doing good in the world and avoiding that which is not good. For the why, the when, the how, the Kingdom Advisors core training touches on a lot of that. It does a very good job with that. In regards to the where, then there is training on the Kingdom Advisors website for members, which is training that I put together, which talks about all this, but focuses, just like we will today, comes down more specifically on the where we invest. Capitalism is a system that has served most of us very, very well, I think we would say. It's a system that is, I believe, is good for people, brings out the best in people. It brings out the worst as well. We just heard a little bit about that, all right? And a great lead-in, by the way. So it has served most of us very, very well. But just like several weeks from now, many of you are going to go into a voting booth. I am. And we're going to pull some levers or whatever the technology is these days, and we're going to vote. And when we invest money, every dollar that is invested, in my view, it's a vote. As a matter of fact, I think it's maybe a more important vote than what we do on the first Tuesday in November. We are voting for whatever it is that's going on the other end of that investment, you might say. Every dollar invested is a vote. So our interaction with capitalism, I think, requires some examination on our part, not only from the investment standpoint, but from our perspective as Christians. And so this is a responsibility. We support whatever is going on in those companies that we're involved in. Wall Street is not just some street off in New York City. You and I are Wall Street. You and I are the ones that make capitalism work. If there was no secondary markets like you and I are participating in, there wouldn't be much of a primary market. Okay, so we are creating demand for whatever the companies are involved in. Chuck Colson, in a quote that I think is a famous quote, says that in every action we take, we're either contributing to the broken condition of the world or participating with God in transforming the world to reflect His righteousness. I think that's from the book, How Now Shall We Live, I believe. And it's true, every action we take is a fork in the road. Same here, same in regards to investing. If you actually look at just some biblical principles regarding all this, some of those relate to our motivation for anything we do. I think what we're going to look at here, are life principles that really apply to anything. I'm going to challenge you today to think about them and being involved with investing. So think about these principles in light of investing. One of those is simply to glorify God in all we do. Is that a biblical principle? I think so. I think it applies to investing as well. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as working for the Lord, not for men, Paul told the Colossians. To seek first God's kingdom and His righteousness. You'll remember those words right out of Jesus' mouth. They have everything to do with our priorities. Worship, there's that word again. To treat everything in life as an act of worship. To be holy, to be set apart. And then also then to love, to respect the dignity and value in everyone else that God has made, that have been made in His image and that Christ died for. With that motivation, we want to know what is God's direction for us. And the part of that direction is then simply to submit to Scripture as our authority, to the Bible. It's biblically responsible investing. Focus, have no other gods, no idols in our lives. I got to camp on that for just a minute. When we invest money, we have a lot of goals, a lot of good goals. We want to earn a good rate of return. We want to minimize risk, tax management, low tracking error, whatever it is. We have a lot of good goals in regards to what we're trying to accomplish with the invested money. The challenge that we have here is that if any of those goals become more important than our relationship with God, they are what? They are idols. That challenges me a little bit. You might say that the first and most important client with any investment transaction is Christ. Avoid evil. Do not set foot on the path of the wicked or walk in the ways of evil men, it says in Proverbs. Ephesians 5:11, you'll hear a lot of BRI people quoting that verse, have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. Being unequally yoked, being an owner, even I believe of a minute portion of a corporation brings a responsibility. It's different than being a customer. And to shun ill-gotten gain. Ill-gotten treasures are of no value, it says in Proverbs. Let me ask you a question. You got a little bit of money to invest, and somebody that you know to be a smart business person comes to you. They show you some numbers. They've got an opportunity. It's in a field where there is growing demand, consistent and growing demand. The margins are high, okay, and you can invest and turn around a good profit. Would you invest in that? Okay. Would it matter if I told you that the product was a new pornography app? Would that make a difference? Okay. Numbers are good. The numbers are good. Think of the tithe off of that. All right. Would it make a difference? Would it be different if I told you that the product instead was an advanced cancer treatment? One that would reduce suffering. Or maybe it would be child safety products, or things like that. Is there a difference in us, with our own money or trying to help clients, to make that kind of decision? There are other issues there as well. This I got out of a paper. This is a lady actually in Georgetown, Indiana, not far from Louisville, Kentucky, where I work. And again, I don't know what it is about, I haven't had that problem, but it's just that problem that'll grab you and it doesn't let go. And too often, if you read a newspaper article about a suicide from somebody who just seems like it's out of the blue, if you read deep enough, very often you'll find a gambling problem, including with Phyllis Courier. Or how about alcohol, where 50% of the product, over 50%, I forgot all our numbers today, Zach, we looked them up, but over 50% of the sales in that industry go to people who have an addiction. They're horribly addicted to that product. It is very destructive in their life. Over 50%. And in an industry where they are spending billions, not millions, but billions of dollars to bring in, to promote to, as you might say, the next generation of drinkers, our young people. Okay. Doesn't matter if we're investing in those things. Randy Alcorn is a friend of Kingdom Advisors. I think the best book I've ever read on money other than the Bible is Money, Possessions, and Eternity, a book that he wrote. And in that, he just has really a simple quote, which is, a Christian should avoid investing in any enterprise that makes its profit from people doing what they shouldn't. Pretty simple. If you want the shorter version, it's there on your handout. It's called Managing God's Money. It's kind of a rewrite of that original long book. All right, so where do we start? You might say that what we've talked about here in the last couple of slides might be avoidance investing, or avoiding those things that are not appropriate to be participating in. So some common goals for those are to protect and preserve marriage and family, which are being hit upon in our culture from sexual practices, for example. Pornography is pervasive. To physical protection for the defenseless, like the poor, or the most dangerous. Do you know where the most dangerous place to live in America is? It's in your mother's womb. Harmful addictions to gambling, alcohol, tobacco, stress, sex, I should say. And then also just all forms of physical or cultural pollution. Call them pollution, two different types of things there. There's a tool that's called Evaluator. Any of y'all seen that? Okay, several of you. And this is a tool that looks at mutual funds. This report is for mutual funds, one of the largest mutual funds. And I just printed this. This is up to date. And they actually look at 8 different issues. I don't know if you can quite read them there or not, but abortion, pornography, human rights issues and some things like that. And so they have a lot of data. One of the parts of data they have is what stocks are actually in that fund. And the other thing that they know is they do research on thousands and thousands of different companies to know what their involvement is in those 8 different issues. And so you put them together, you get this report here, which shows, see if I can read it, 22% of the companies in that fund are involved in abortion in one way or the other. Okay, they have a pretty broad definition of abortion, but still that's 22%. Coming down a little bit, pornography, 26% involved in that in one way or the other. These are large U.S. companies for the most part in this fund. These don't have to be your priorities. I'm showing you this as an example. But along those lines, if you look at those 8 different issues that they do their research on, and these are companies here that they're not necessarily in that particular fund, but they are companies that violate, is their word, one or more, many of them more than just one of those 8 different things. Many of them 2, 3, even 4 of those different things on that list that they're involved in. And if you look at those companies, then you realize these are really common investments. If you pick stocks or use a separate account manager, you're seeing a lot of those names. If you buy mutual funds and look at the holdings, you're seeing a lot of those names. The difficult point here is that if this matters, if what's going on the other end of our investment dollars matters, you can't avoid these things by accident. Finney Curavilla is a manager for a mutual fund company called Eventide, and he was in Louisville speaking to Kingdom Advisors. It's been a few years now. And when we got done, I stuck a camera in his face and I asked him some questions. And he had an interesting story or an interesting little analogy about what he called the mafia wife. All right, the mafia wife. So I am sure that this is not politically correct, but the mafia wife from Finney, and listen fast, it's just about 1 minute.
One of the analogies that we have found helpful in understanding biblical responsible investing or faith-based investing is the analogy of a mafia wife. So the mafia wife is the wife who profits very handsomely from her husband's activities. She's getting fur coats and diamonds and cars and all the rest, and she has an inkling that something is not right about all that the husband is doing in terms of how he's generating that income, but still happily takes that money and receives it and spends it on herself because she enjoys those gifts and doesn't really want to ask the hard questions. And just as we are uncomfortable with the morality of that situation, I would argue that we as investors should be uncomfortable about being proverbial mafia wives receiving income from business activities that, some of those, if we sort of have a sense, maybe in industries and in sectors that we would not be comfortable with, fostering addiction, for example, and we should similarly strive to not fall into that same trap.
A pretty uncomfortable analogy, I think, but one that hits home, again, uncomfortably so. When you look at BRI strategies, we've really talked about things to avoid, and that is certainly one of the strategies of biblically responsible investing. Some might call it negative screening. So we're looking at, let's get rid of them. Let's not invest in them. And this is the strategy, frankly, that is easiest to enact right now, to actually put into practice, is let's avoid those things that we shouldn't be participating in. There are also some others, though, as well. For example, then there's seeking the good. You might call it positive screening. And we actually heard from Praxis, if you remember, Jerry Gray, I think, is the one speaking for Praxis, where they talked about not only avoiding the bad, but doing some other things and doing them in a positive way, going after the good. There's one ETF where they use actually artificial intelligence to score companies and then to gravitate towards the good. And there's a lot of different things out there. Eventide, actually the same, that's the Finney Curavilla. So he talked about the mafia wife, but they do an incredible job of not only avoiding the bad, but then investing in companies, in their words, that make the world rejoice, that are really incredibly positive in what it is that they're trying to do. You can also work for change, sometimes called shareholder activism. So when you own a company, then you have a voice that you don't have when you're not an owner. So you can engage in talks with management, shareholder resolutions if you need to, and things of that kind of nature. And then also there is the what I've called mission-based, or we've heard that phrase, impact investing. So there are things that you can do that by their very definition are set up. The motivation is to do something that is positive. The ones we care about, those that are positive from a biblical perspective. So there are community development notes. We use some of these in our practice, and then we're able to target them towards microfinance, for example. So loans to help the poorest of the poor all over the world to make a difference in their life. Remember, we heard earlier about very often the poor, there's no big inherent problem why they're poor, it's just about they're undercapitalized, the system is not right. Well, sometimes a $100 loan makes all the difference in the world. And there's other things, church loans, or church bonds. I don't have an outlet for those right now, but we've used those over the years as well. Just kind of a quick aside, I didn't know where else to put this, but I wanted to make sure that it gets in there. And this is probably me being just overly sensitive. I don't know if it's still the case, but I know years ago, too often BRI people, BRI practitioners were just seen as a bunch of, judgmental. I was waiting for that word when I asked you all earlier what you think of. I was waiting for somebody to say judgmental or mean-spirited or something like that. Because it can be pharisaical, is that the right word, like a Pharisee? To me, the more I've grown as a Christian, and I've been working on this issue for 20 years, but to me the motivation has more and more become simply love. If you remember the greatest commandment, the greatest commandment? All right, if we could say that in 4 words, what would that be? Okay, it'd be love God, love others. And so that is the motivation here. It's the love of God towards me. It's my love back toward Him, is at least my story when it comes to biblically responsible investing. And then also with others. Either of those, frankly, by themselves gets the job done. It makes me want to care about what's going on the other end of my investment dollars. But it starts with my love for God. Even if you told me that investing differently would never have an impact on the world, I would still do this just because I'm in a relationship with my Father, and He asked me to be holy. He asked me to care. By the way, anybody here, I'm in Indianapolis, anybody here have a connection with Indiana Wesleyan University, IWU? Any at all? Okay. They have actually an incredible magazine for alumni of their business school. And they asked me to write an article, and I did that, and it was actually on this very topic. So, biblically responsible investing, an act of love, is what the article, the title is. And so I dived a little bit deeper into that. It's not very long. If you want a copy of that, then just give me your card or something when we're done, and I'll get that to you. It'll be a link or something. I'm not sure how I would get it to you, but I'll get it to you. If you're going to go down this road, there's a lot of investment resources that are out there. So there are mutual funds. Some of them are out here. Timothy Plan, Praxis. Who else is out here? Eventide, thank you. James as well. So there are companies out there that can help you with that. There are also variable annuities. Frankly, there aren't very many, but there are a few that have a couple of sub-accounts that are care about what's going on the other end of the investment dollars. They're separately managed accounts. 2 ways to do this. One is there are some separately managed accounts that are geared in towards biblically responsible investing. It's what they do. And so they do a lot of the research and such for you. However, you can also very often go to a separate account manager, and if you've done your own research and say, like for example, here's a list, don't buy these stocks, then a lot of them will cooperate with you. And so that's another way to get it. Puts a little more research on your shoulders, but again, it can be done that way. Turnkey programs, so if you just want somebody else to do this, then they are out there. And so you just look, and if the screening is what you like, the screening meaning what are they buying, what are they not, then you may have found an answer that does a lot of the work for you. And then there are also mission-based investments like we talked about here already. The thing I just forgot to put on that slide is exchange-traded funds. So ETFs, there's one called Inspire. That's the one that is, they avoid the bad and then they use this artificial intelligence to gravitate towards the good. And then also, I think very interesting is the Vidant. All right, so they come at it from a little different perspective, not really screening out, but using biblical principles to figure out what they're going to invest in and what they're not. So it's a different kind of way in, but again, I'm in favor of every development of what does the Bible say, how do we bring a biblical perspective into what we invest in and what we don't. Also screening tools, so there's the evaluator. You saw a sample report on that earlier. The BRI Institute looks at individual companies and gives just line items. Okay, what did they do, a year ago about some topic and things like that. And SOGO is one that I haven't used, but Tommy and I have looked at. And so they have a lot of data on funds, and it really runs the gamut. So everything from abortion to animal testing, just all sorts of different kinds of issues. IW Financial, they may be a different name now. I think somebody bought them. But if you Google IW Financial, they have a lot of research, good depth on it. MSCI. I know I've missed some. What are some other tools? Zach, do you know some? Or I'm sure there are more. There are lots of different ways to gather data about what a company is doing beyond just the numbers, beyond the normal financial analysis. That's right, LDI, right? Yeah, so they print that list of contributors to Planned Parenthood, right? I've seen that list. It's a long list. So if you're thinking this sounds like something you want to do, or maybe you want to take another step into it, then there's the navigating the journey. So I'm kind of, I hate to say warning you, all right, but what'll happen is you'll say, oh, that, I get it, I want to do something about that, and I just know that then you're going to move forward, all right, but you're going to come across questions and you're not going to know the answer. And you can work through it, but I'm just telling you that's the normal. After you've done all of that, I don't think biblically responsible investing in our practice is all that difficult on a day-to-day basis. Yes, we give it some time and attention. It's one more element we need to reach, but it really is not that hard. But the getting there is going to require you to ask yourself or to ask others some questions. So the first one is, do I even want to do this at all? Okay, you can be like me and try to ignore it for a few years. I did for, 3 or 4 years. I just kind of ignored this whole topic after I was first exposed to it. But if you're going to look at it, then another question is, what does this look like for you? What are your convictions about investing in a biblically responsible investing? I don't think we all need to be exactly the same in here. Okay, we can sure help each other. I think we should. We should be talking with each other. But what does this look like for you? Who will make the decisions about how to implement this? Me or my clients? That's an interesting conversation. I know people that go both directions on that. Okay? I know reps that won't invest in something, for example, where there's a connection with abortion, no matter what the client wants to do. They're very willing to say, Mr. Prospective client, I'm not a good fit for you. Okay? And then others let the clients decide what this is going to look like. What tools or resources will I use? How will I communicate this to clients? That's an interesting. How do you bring this up? How do you bring it up? Boy, I remember conversations with clients where we talked about, I bring it up and I say, this is where you are now, and I'll show them a report, something like we saw several slides ago, and I'll say you're there because I put you there. And then, do you want to do something different? And it's their choice in our practice. What are the regulatory issues? Are there regulatory issues here? Yeah, there are regulatory issues everywhere. All right, so making sure the client knows what they're doing, why they're doing it. As a matter of fact, if you're just to make a habit of avoiding a certain issue for everybody, I think your client should know that. I think that should be disclosed. So we have our clients, there's a few things that they sign off on. And then, of course, where you're going to go to get help. So there's the groups like this, and I just long for more and more places where we can go and we can talk to each other and ask questions and things like that about this. In our practice, then the way that I've done it for years is to, first of all, we don't lead with this. So we're financial planners. We're doing a financial plan. We're also investment advisors. So if we get to a point and a client is going to invest some money with us, then it's about a 3-minute conversation. And so, all right, let me bring up something. This is, some issues, and is this something that matters to you? Okay, yes, then this is the way that looks a little bit different. Are there any other differences they need to know about? Often the answer is yes. Sometimes expense ratios, some other things, we tell them everything. Most of our clients, about 80% say, yeah, I want to do that, and we go do it. It's about a 3-minute conversation. Well, what I did a few years ago was I asked 10 clients, 5 couples and 5 singles, to come in the office one at a time, and I put a camera in their face, and I just asked them questions like, what did you think when I first told you about this? And things like that. I had to teach them what the phrase biblically responsible investing means. We don't even use that phrase with clients. And I was amazed at the level of conviction they had about this, even though I thought it was a 3-minute decision. One of those was Roger and Lee Dillon. And so we talked, it was about 20, I've edited this down to about 5 minutes of the interview that we had with them.
When Roger's father passed away, he left us with stock. And some of that stock was invested in companies that we knew were not the right place to be, such as in tobacco and alcohol. So we sold those. And in the process, being believers in the Lord, we knew we wanted something that would bring glory to Him. So over a course of our history together and praying together and working with the Holy Spirit in our lives, it's easy sometimes to try to make your marriage biblically correct or raise your children, but you don't think of your finances that way. You always sometimes put them in a different category. The Lord just talked to us, and that's why we decided that the best way to honor God with what He's given to us, it's not ours anyway, was to invest it in BRI.
Yeah, and biblically responsible investing was not something I was keen on through the first part of my Christian life. It seems like that didn't come about until later. And as Lee said, it's certainly easy to put that into a different category, and I think I had done that also. So suddenly when the switch starts to turn and you have to think about, is it right to have investments that you may not directly be investing in, such as in mutual funds, but yet when you think about it, you really are, and suddenly you begin to apply biblical principles to that, you just can't eliminate it anymore. You have to include it as part of your Christian life. When you look at making contributions, for example, to organizations, we wouldn't contribute to organizations that, for example, promote abortion. But yet when we began to look at our investments, we began to see things there that, while they might provide a good return, they certainly do not honor the Lord. And with that in mind, then that changed our whole perspective on how we have to be good stewards of the money that He's provided to us. I think about the little bit of money that God's entrusted to us compared to the whole. It's a grain of sand on the seashore, but what I do with that is just as honoring to the Lord as if I were Warren Buffett and wanted to have billions of dollars and use that in however that might be invested. The amount is really insignificant. In fact, it's irrelevant. It can be a problem trying to decide where you draw the line for BRI. How far do I go down the list of the agendas that a corporation may have that are acceptable or unacceptable? How unacceptable does it have to be before I no longer decide to invest in a company? That can be tough, but practically speaking, you have to make a decision somewhere, and And so you carefully pray about that and make a decision and go on.
There isn't a single area of our lives as believers that is separate from wanting to honor and please the Lord. I don't care whether it's something major or something extremely minor, because He is a God of detail. So He knows every aspect about everything. So as a believer, to honor Him, there isn't an area of my life, my investments, my children, my family, my marriage, friendships, whatever, that's off limits. He wants it all. Not just a portion, He wants it all. So nothing's off limits.
I'm really happy that our investment advisors shared the thoughts of biblical responsible investing. You know, I'm not sure where else that information would come from. Even when you look across investment advisors, you really find, unfortunately, very, very few that truly understand, much less employ the BRI concept in their recommendations. So I'm extremely happy. I wish that I'd been brought up with that thought all along, but I'm glad that we're where we are now.
I am blessed that He brought this to me and that I did not find it out from someone else.
I don't really expect my investment advisor to be perfect all the time with this. If they were trying to be perfect, they'd probably never get anything done, never accomplish it, because they'd be going in circles all the time. You have to put a stake in the ground sometime, and that's okay if it changes some over time. But getting a stake in the ground to begin with is the most important part.
All right, it's time really for your thoughts, your questions about it. We're just calling this a Q&A or an open forum. You may think about your biggest obstacle, just what's the biggest hurdle trying to get through here that either you have or that you think your clients might have about this. Most common objections. Also just portfolio construction. Ask about that if you want to. Get into the weeds a little bit. Educating clients and having that conversation, or you might have just other comments, especially if you've been down this road a little bit, other things that you want to share. What thoughts or questions do you have? Come on.
How were you introduced to BRI?
How was I?
Yeah, first introduced.
It was about 1996, and I was busy in my practice, and I got a phone call from a guy named Hardt, who's the president of the Timothy Plan Mutual Funds, and he told me about this mutual fund family I'd never heard of before, but he started it because he was frustrated. He couldn't find the kind of investments that he wanted for some pastor clients. Every place he wanted to go, try to build a portfolio, he's finding we have abortion, we have porn, we have all of this stuff in there. And so he left a pretty lucrative position at one of the major firms and started a mutual fund company, Timothy Plan, and they're here today. And so the rest of the story is I said, okay, good, thanks, good luck, and then did my best to forget about it, as best I could. But the other thing that was happening at that time is there was a group called the National Association of Christian Financial Consultants, and these people, the founders, were really committed to what we now call biblically responsible investing. And I like to be around them because they were Christians in the business, and I wanted to act out my faith in the business. And so after being in 2 or 3 of their conferences or whatever, then even through the denseness, it kind of got through. I'll tell you a little more of that story in a second. Thoughts or questions? Yes, sir.
How do you think about gray areas, things that people will debate about, like the alcohol industry, the gambling industry?
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody agrees whether it's right or wrong.
Right.
How do you approach that?
Yeah, I think that's good. So the first thing I'm going to say is that there will be gray areas. And so for myself and for others as well, let's not let the gray areas stop us from doing the black and white. So that's one. If you take nothing else, all right, that's my strong encouragement for you. So there are gray areas. Frankly, most of our clients don't care to get into the weeds. Most of our clients, may or may not be yours, but abortion and pornography are the big issues with them. And if we're doing what we can to avoid them, we could probably go either direction on gambling and alcohol and things like that. So a lot of that in our practice, doesn't have to be yours, but in our practice, we're making those decisions. And then also, some of it also has to do with what's available. Okay, what's out there how can I build a good portfolio? So if we, and they don't all do the same. So if you look at Eventide and Timothy Plan and Praxis and who else is out there? James and others, they approach it a little bit differently. So in our practice, there's a few things they're going to have to do, or they're not included in our universe of possible funds. But there still are some gray areas.
I noticed that just lately, a lot of these big tech companies are very politically active.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are pushing back on that too. So even politics and social change has become an issue.
Yeah.
It's not just morality of pornography, abortion, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and that's right. And so it's going to be a matter of if you're picking individual stocks, then sometimes it's a little bit easier to point out, some company has done this, and I just don't feel right as a Christian owning them. But if you're picking mutual funds, that's a little different, because then mutual fund has to be black and white. Frankly, they're not quite as nimble at those kinds of things, and so they're going to either invest in that company or they're not. And again, so one of the possibilities is that you are going to have something that you'll never do, that you won't buy certain kinds of things, but there may be other areas. When you look at the area of homosexuality in our culture today, then companies, when gay marriage was before the Supreme Court, they're writing briefs. Companies, corporations are taking their time and money to write briefs to send to the Supreme Court. All right, how should we feel about that as investors? I know how I feel about that as an investor, but my answer doesn't need to be your answer. But again, those are some things to think through. In our size, we're kind of deal with the mass affluent in our practice, which means we tend to use mutual funds, exchange traded funds a lot. So sometimes those answers are really easy, because if Timothy Plan and Eventide and others aren't addressing it, then we can't address it. Now we may talk to them. All right, I share my opinion with Timothy Plan often. All right, but again, we're picking what's out there and putting the best portfolios we can together. Yes, sir.
Now, just curious, what was the composition of your clientele prior to implementing BRI, and what was the transition like, and what did that composition look like now?
Like composition, you mean like Christian, non-Christian? I don't know.
Was it practiced primarily other Christians?
It certainly goes more in that direction. It's not 100% Christian, so we don't ask for that, and we want to again we just don't put any roadblocks up for a non-Christian to come work with us. But we do this. Some clients get vocal about it and tell their friends, and so just slowly over many years, 20 years or so that I've been at this, then I would say a higher and higher percentage, certainly of our new clients, have been Christian. Interestingly, though, clients rarely come to us, every once in a while, but rarely come to us saying, I need you to review my investments for this kind of stuff. Most of the time they're coming because they're getting more serious about retiring or something like that. And then this is something else that becomes a part of the conversation. Yes, sir.
How detailed can you go with something like Evaluator, or an example I've heard once was that it's screened out for abortion for a company that makes condoms. So if you get an initial screening, how far can you dig to know where it's coming from?
Yeah. So there's no perfect tool. There's no perfect mutual fund. Just like everything else in life. Okay, so we're not going to be perfect in this, but boy, you can go way, way down the road of doing something about it. So I don't think that would be screened out. So it might be screened out in other places where birth control is forbidden. all right, in other faiths. But as an example, again, with the evaluator, I don't think that screens out. However, there are some birth controls that can be abortive. They may not be designed to be abortive, and yet still they will destroy, or they will keep a fertilized egg from implanting in the womb. I'm not pointing there like I'm a woman or something, but you know what I mean. All right, so many, including me, would consider that abortive. And so even though that's not like the on-label use, is that the right phrase? You know what I mean? That's not the primary use of that drug. It's just a regular birth control to prevent fertilization in the first place. If it can be abortive, then the evaluator is probably going to catch that and flag it. Anything else? A lot of good questions. I know you've got other questions in your mind. And I think I have contact information somewhere on the handout so that you can reach out to me. Just remember, I'm like you, I'm a busy practitioner, but I will do my best because this is a topic that I just love talking about, obviously. Just some resources available to you: the Biblically Responsible Investing, Understanding the Heart of God. This is some video training. I mentioned it earlier. You need to be a member of Kingdom Advisors to go through this. This is some stuff that I put together a few years ago. It's video-based. It's a lot about what we talked about today, but in 6 different segments, about 5 hours total, something like that, a workbook, some other things like that. It's $99. I don't get any of that. They use it for no cost. I ask them to charge something, so you know how that goes. We place more value on something we pay for. Kingdom Advisors, also they have a Biblically Responsible Investing community group, and they have a couple of sessions at the annual conference in February. They do some things throughout the year as well. Kingdom Advisors is a good place to be. There's the Christian Investment Forum. Do you all know this group at all, CIF? So this actually, it's a membership organization of investment vendors, okay? Timothy Plan's a member, Eventide is, and some others. And, but they've had a couple of summits, as they say. It's just about a 2-day thing. They've had 2 of them now in August, and really good at diving into some of these details and spending a little more time like on some of these good questions that we've had here today. The website is there. You don't have to pay to be a member to go to the summit, for example. National Association of Christian Financial Consultants has been around for over 20 years. NACFC, this is an all-volunteer group, so it's a little looser and fluctuates a little more, but it's made up of people that are mostly committed to biblically responsible investing. And what else? There's just a lot of other stuff on there. Eventide has a good blog. Stewardship Partners has a lot of good articles. Just Google biblically responsible investing, and you'll find a lot of good tools. A question for you as we close here. If we look at kind of what needs to be in place for all of this to work, you need to have somebody, not necessarily a Christian, but often a Christian who cares. You have to have an investment advisor who will bring it up because the client doesn't know to bring it up. Okay, so if it matters, then it's up to us. And then you need, of course, some research. You need some investment vendors that can help you with all of this. So my question for you is, where's the bottleneck? All right, so in other words, lots of people, even wonderful, committed Christian people, don't do this. They've never even heard of it. Where's the bottleneck? What's the weak link? What do you think? Awareness, but that points me right back to where I think the weak link is. All right, so I guess you don't want to say it, but it's us. It's us. It's the investment advisor. When we talk to clients about this, they want to do something about it. As I've said, they even develop more conviction than that I ever thought possible out of a 3-minute conversation. There are research tools out there. There are investment vendors, and there are more and more coming. So we heard earlier today about it's not on the shelf yet, but that idea of mission-based investing is what they called it here earlier today, wasn't it? From Sagamore Institute. Okay, again, not ready to utilize today. Really, the avoidance of investing is kind of the low-hanging fruit, in my opinion, and the thing that we can go out and do something today. But again, with some positive overtones from some of the mutual fund companies and what they're doing out there.
I have a question
Yes, ma'am.
Because I think I haven't heard very many people ask. I plan to work till I'm 90
Uh-huh.
because I'm living to 120, but nobody can tell me how much money I need to have invested to live to 120.
Yep.
Can you help me with that?
No.
Okay.
What I mean is, Tommy and I often joke with clients.
About the matrix that you
Yeah, we just tell us when you're going to die. It makes the planning so much easier. But you know, that's where, you know, we have those conversations. We have more than once, and so that's where we bring wisdom into it. That you may want to work to 90, you may or may not be able to work to 90.
right. And then it's
And-
not about the able, but if I don't plan on it
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think about it, I may be just like everybody else who says, well, I better retire at 65 because I'm only living to 80.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I worry about in financial advising with clients. I'm a CPA. I
Mhm.
don't do the financial planning in a
Yes.
typical
Yes.
way. So I'm not familiar with how you matrix that.
Yeah, so it really, a guy that I heard years ago said, when in trouble, ask a question. And so you ask your clients questions, tell me about your family and how long did they live and how long did they feel like working. And do you know anybody who was kind of made to retire earlier than they thought they would ever have to? That's very common in the last decades. And so that's the skill of having that face-to-face. That's where we bring values in those kinds of conversations. A few years ago, my brother referred a lady to me for investing, and so she came. This was, gosh, actually many years ago now, where I was just starting to toy and kind of avoid at the same time all of this stuff. And so at the time, what I did is if a client came in and they used a bunch of Christian language, then I would say, hey, this is something you might be interested in. And so she came in and we talked, we did our planning. She was going to invest with us. She'd used some Christian language apparently. And I said, hey, this is something that you might want to be interested in. And I tried to explain it just as, you know, dispassionately as possible, you know, just as a fork in the road. And she didn't know what to do. She just didn't know what to do, whether to employ biblically responsible investing or not. And she said, she worked for my brother. So she said, when I'm in a situation with your brother and we don't know what to do, your brother just says, what's the right thing to do? I said, Dan, what's the right thing to do? And I don't know if she could tell that I was doing my best to hold it together at that time because I knew the right thing to do. And I'd just been trying to avoid it as best as I could. It wasn't long thereafter that I moved my own money to something that is more in line with what I believe to be biblical principles. And then gotten more and more involved, and here I am in front of you today. And I've also asked myself, you know, as we accumulate money for the long term, for the future, I don't know a whole lot about my future. I might have a plan, but none of us know a whole lot about our future. There's really only one thing we know about our future, and that God is there. God knows what He wants of us, what's actually going to happen. It's going to be God's responsibility to fund it, whatever it is. Okay, He might use money that we've accumulated, He might not, who knows? But the only thing I know is God is there. And so as I ask myself, as I invest, as I try to accumulate some money for this unknown future, how much of that nest egg do I want to have come from the profits of, for me, abortion is a big issue. How much do I want to have come from abortion? And my answer simply is, to the extent I can help it, I want the answer to be zero. And again, going down this road, there is a lot that we can do in regards to that issue and a lot of other issues. My encouragement to you is, if all this seems a little overwhelming, how in the world am I going to do this in my practice? What's my broker-dealer going to say? Etc. All that stuff. I'm going to encourage you to start with one steward, yourself, your own money before God, and just say, God, how do I process this? How do I handle this? What should I do as just one steward before you, Lord, with the money that is temporarily in my care? and then work from there. Let me pray with you. Father, I've used a whole lot of words up here. My voice is going, Father, but I would just pray that whatever you want to stick in the minds and in the hearts of those in the room, Lord, that you would do just that. Whether they're here today, whether they're watching on video later, whatever it is, Father, I would just pray that your will be done in all of this. Lord, help us just to have that goal in whatever we do, however we handle this, and handle everything, that we do it in a way that brings glory to you, Lord, that is worship. Father, we love you and we praise you in this, and we trust you to lead us. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you.